Swann here. I am your televangelist for the Church of Splendor. I've been telling myself for days that I don't want to talk about this, and yet I keep coming back to it and coming back to it. I listen to things like that. The things you can't put out of your mind are important. When I lecture incessantly about cognitive dissonance, that's what I'm talking about. When you say, I want something, but you don't go get it. Or when you say, I don't want something, but you don't stop doing it. That's cognitive dissonance. That's holding two mutually contradictory premises in your mind at the same time. I like to think I don't suffer from that, but I'm sure I do. Every consequential mistake I've made in my life has taken that form, that general form. Doing something I said I don't want to do, or not doing something that I should have been doing that I did want to do. This is an error. This is an error. This is the most permanently consequential error you can make in your life, because if you don't stop doing this, you'll continue to make mistakes, and every one of those mistakes will be the occasion for new cognitive dissonance in the form of regret. To say, I wish I weren't doing what I am doing is a correctable nuisance. All I have to do is stop and do something else instead. But to say, I wish I hadn't done what I did do, can't be resolved. You can't fix that. You cannot fix that. You can make it better. If you go back into my catalog of videos and look for a video about ripping off the Band-Aid, I will talk to you about how to recover from regrets. It is possible to recover, but it is never possible to be healed, because the regret will never go away. You made a mistake. You did something that you knew at the time was a moral error, was a moral fault. And you can't undo that. You can't cause that to cease to exist. Your regret will end when your consciousness ends, not before. So, what it is that I want to talk about, I've been calling it in my head the turd in the punch bowl. This is a deep south colloquialism. People want to equate it to raining on your parade. I like to talk about the elephant in the room, bringing up the elephant in the room, the one thing that nobody else wants to talk about. That's the one that you most should talk about. That's the elephant in the room. I've also written in the past, you can search for this, just search in quotes on implied accusation and you'll find the essay. But I wrote a long-form essay a long time ago about what I call the implied accusation, the unstated, underground, silent accusation that can exist between people who most fundamentally don't trust each other and haven't given each other any reason to trust each other. And so they sit there in seemingly civil discourse, seemingly civil negotiation, but underneath all that there is this belief that the other guy is a crook, that the other guy is cheating me, that the other guy is taking advantage of me, that the other guy is not admitting to past injuries of me, not making amends, not apologizing, on and on and on. I mean, all kinds of things that people are not talking about when they're not talking about what matters most. But the interesting thing about the turd and the punch bowl is that it has kind of a social dimension to it. I mean, obviously all of these things are social in the sense that I can't rain on a parade when there's only one person in it. When there's only one person in a parade, that person is just walking. It's not a parade. It's whenever two or more of you are gathered in the back seat of a convertible that it's a parade. And the elephant in the room requires a social interaction also. You can't bring up the elephant in the room except to the person who's ignoring it. Likewise, the implied accusation, my answer to that whenever you're in that situation is just name it. Just name whatever it is that the person doesn't want said. That's the thing that you should say. But the turd in the punch bowl is really kind of interesting because it implies not just this social dimension, but you know, kind of an open act of hostility. That there's this party going on, and in the middle of a party there's a huge punch bowl, and everybody's gathered around the punch bowl, and it's a part of their communal enjoyment. They're together and they're enjoying this event collectively, and the punch bowl is kind of the symbol for their communal enjoyment. And then someone takes a dump in the punch bowl, or maybe just takes a scoop of cat litter and throws it in there if you want to be slightly less revolting in your formulations, in your imaginations. But the turd in the punch bowl is really a hostile act against that group. It's an attempt to destroy their communal enjoyment. And this is not what I mean by it. I just used it. I'm using it. I'm thinking of it because of the South Park use of it. And it's really interesting that way. And when South Park dealt with the turd in the punch bowl, and I can't tell you what episode this is, but obviously search for South Park turd in the punch bowl and you'll find it. But the argument that they made about the turd in the punch bowl was someone pointing out what he considered to be factual, that men presented with Tiger Woods opportunities, men presented with an unlimited supply of free, no strings attached sex, will not be able to turn it down. That any man would run wild in an orgy of wild abandon if there were but women enough and time. I dispute that. Obviously, I dispute that. I am a very faithful husband, and I'm faithful as something that I think about or worry about or as a part of my praxis. I'm faithful as a secondary consequence of being deeply in love with my wife. I love my wife so much. There's no way that any other woman can compare to her. No woman alive, no woman who ever lived, no woman ever can compete with my wife for my attention, for my affection, and for my ardor. And partly that's easy for me. It's probably easier for me than it is for other men because I'm too much aware of the casual deceits, the completely implausible masks, the pathetic, pitiable costumes of lies that people wear. I'm aware of lies all the time. I can't interact with other people without seeing all the lies they're telling, without seeing all of the ugliness behind those lies, and makes a lot of people really unattractive to me. It's not that I am even in the smallest way tempted by other women, because whatever they might look like in an appearance, they can be very tempting. I'll give them credit, especially young women. Men of all ages are attracted to young women. Women of all ages are attracted to men approximately their own age, a couple 2 or 3 years older. And men of all ages are attracted to women who are 23 at the oldest. And I do get that. I totally get that, and I like that. I mean, I really like that. I like that as a part of being alive as an adult human male, is being able to walk around everywhere and see all of this incredibly beautiful walking pornography everywhere. That would be in the form of women. But to take any sort of action in the way of adultery, infidelity, never happen. It will never happen. I love my wife too much, and I really don't have any interest whatever in other women, none, or other people for that matter. And I'm interested in them as friends, I only have interest in people as friends to the extent that they can tolerate me, which means they have to be 100% scrupulously honest, because I will call them on every lie. I will call you on every lie. I call you on every lie every week, and I don't even know you. I can't even see you. And yet I can see all of your lies and tell you what they are, and I'm really very proud of you for enduring me, because I know it cannot possibly be easy to take me staring at you like this and essentially reading your mind. And of course, I'm not reading your mind. I can't read minds. No one can read minds. But I'm a great believer in similarities. And when I see something that looks like something else, I assume it's that same thing. And when I see, you know, dozens and dozens of cofactors in an individual, cofactors that correspond to the exact same characteristics and behaviors in other people of the same age and similar circumstances, there's no reason not to assume that what I'm seeing is exactly the same thing, and obviously it is. We are, each one of us, individual and unique, but we are individual and unique within parameters, and those parameters are pretty tight. And people who successfully manage to stay alive are doing it all in approximately the same way, and I can see everything they're doing. I can see everything that they did do. I can see, not in detail, and obviously I can be wrong about specific facts or specific individuals, but in the large I'm not wrong. And give me your family photos, give me a half hour with your family photos, and I will tell you the whole story of your life, and you will be scared shitless. You'll think I'm cold reading you, but I'm not. It's just an awareness of the way things work. And so that South Park argument about the turd in the punch bowl, that any man, if given the opportunity, and the parallel argument would be that any individual, any person, if given the opportunity, would rob a bank. Any individual, if given the opportunity, would rape a helpless victim. Any individual, if given the opportunity, would take over the country and exterminate all the malcontents. Some people will do any one of those things, but most people won't do any of them. And most people are faithful in their marriage, overwhelmingly faithful in their marriages. Most people never commit adultery, despite all the crap that we're told. And even those who do, don't habituate it and don't wreck their marriages with it. And the thing that wrecks their marriage is laziness on the part of the man, which is what we've been talking about for the past few weeks, what the book Father's Day is about. But I don't believe that, given the opportunity for unlimited sex, obviously for $50 any guy can have sex, for $25 if you negotiate. And if you're willing to waste an hour in a bar, then you could probably get a girl for about $15, the price of 2 Mai Tais. And yet men don't do this. So I dispute the argument from South Park, but I really like the expression, the turd in the punch bowl, because it's the turd in the punch bowl is the one thing that nobody wants to talk about. That's what South Park really meant by it, and that's what I mean by it today, is the things that nobody wants to talk about. You're having a good time at the party because you don't notice that the servants are all slaves and the electricity is made by burning the body fat of the dead ones, and all of the other things that are going on all around you, all of these horrible, monstrous things that are going on all around you all the time. You stick your fingers in your ear and you dance la 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 along with the band, and you try to have a good time and not to notice. And therefore people like me are the turd in the punch bowl, because I always want to talk about the things you don't want to talk about. The only things I really want to talk about are the things you don't want to talk about. Because the things that you don't want to talk about are the interesting ones. Everything that you do want to talk about is trivia. And that's why you want to talk about it, because it's comfortable, it's easy, it's non-challenging, it's non-threatening, it's not, it offers, it portends no risk to your public persona, the public image that you put on for other people. Talking about trivia, weather, baseball, politics, TV shows, celebrity gaffes, or celebrity sex tapes. Talking about everything that doesn't matter is your stratagem for avoiding talking about the things that do matter. And all I ever want to talk about are the things things that do matter. All I really care about is the timeless, the eternal, the universal. If I happen to latch on to some detail as we're going by, this train of time, if I happen to notice something out the window, it doesn't really matter, except as it connects to the timeless and the universal. That's all that really matters. Is when you understand human life in the abstract, in the sense of the timeless and universal truths. You can manage the day-to-day very easily, but on the other end, if you try to execute the concourse of a whole life on the basis of the random decisions that you happen to make at any given moment, you're going to crash. Your life is going to be a disaster because you don't know how to make your choices in the context of your whole life. I had a fun week in the reactions to the publication of Father's Day. 8 really good reviews on Amazon. I'm waiting for yours. Go put it there. Please review the book at Amazon, review the book at Goodreads. If you know a writer, journalist, blogger, someone up the food chain who cares about love, sex, marriage, family, but also current events and human civilization enduringly, I would really appreciate it if you put the book in front of them. If you need me to front you a review copy, let me know. I'll be more than happy to, because I want people to review this book. And I'd love for you to get yourself to Amazon today and write your review. But the reviews have been very, very good. Very good. I'm in love with that. And the reaction out in the larger world has been very good, with 2 exceptions, which would be feminists and men's rights activists. And I find that really fascinating, that I could write a book that pisses off both halves of the feminism debate. Doesn't make me right. I think it makes me worth reading, because if I can piss off both teams, then either both of them are wrong or I'm wrong, but you won't know until you read the book. So that's a real good reason to read it. I am dismayed in general by the response from particular interest groups who should be all over this book. The one that I would pick out first, and really most egregiously in my evaluation, is Big-O Objectivist, official objectivist. This is Ayn Rand's official philosophy. It is administered by Leonard Peikoff, who was the one toady of Rand's that she couldn't manage to repel before she died, so he ended up inheriting everything. This is the secret of the fawning nephew, is just keep fawning. And Leonard Peikoff has proved himself to be remarkably adept as a fawning nephew, and I am challenged to discover any other talents in the man. You may differ. But the official objectivist movement, not just Peikoff, but all of the people he employs, certainly should be paying attention to me by now. 2 years ago, I undermined their moral philosophy in Men Alive. I demonstrated, just in passing, it wasn't even a matter of interest to me, but just in passing, I demonstrated that Ayn Rand's moral philosophy is fundamentally collectivist. It's not really an individualist political philosophy, it's an anti-collectivist political philosophy, and it's not really an egoist political or moral philosophy as much as it is an anti-egoist moral philosophy, much in the same way that Rand's best enemy, William Buckley, was at exactly the same time engaged in anti-communism or whatever. It's utterly anti-communism, utterly unbelievable philosophical doctrines that consist of nothing but enshrining your enemies and then pretending to argue with them. Utterly silly, useless, wasteful practice for a philosopher. But in fact, the egoism that Rand was defending, and therefore the political philosophy that Rand was defending, are fundamentally in error, because Rand didn't actually identify the locus of moral philosophy, which is the self, which is the ego. This is why it's egoism. But without identifying the nature of the self, the origin and nature of the self, you certainly cannot defend self-interest, because Self-interest is the interest of that self. If you haven't identified it, you can't say what its interests are. And we can see that right away. I took it apart 2 weeks after Man Alive was published. I mean, I didn't have to think about this at all. In fact, we worked it out in the revision process, but it took me no time at all. I mean, literally, the time it took to write a paragraph, I was done. This would be the objectivist argument about abortion. The objectivist argument about abortion is completely atrocious. I mean, it is atrocious. Peikoff has called unborn babies parasites. And the Big-O Objectivist since Rand herself have been really outrageously, deliberately offensive in the arguments that they make for abortion. But of course, the argument for abortion as such is deliberately offensive, is offensive in any case, because abortion is an egregious moral fault. It cannot possibly ever be otherwise, because you are deliberately, by your own initiation, snuffing out your own offspring, your own child. You're killing your own child. Abortion is prenatal infanticide. That's what it is, prenatal infanticide. And as soon as you identify it that way, you no longer have any problem understanding why it certainly is not a moral good. And of course, this is the way that Rand wanted to represent it, and the way that the official objectivists represent it to this day, is that abortion is some sort of moral good. Well, no, ask the victims. Obviously, you cannot ask the children because they're all dead, but ask the mothers. Go talk to the mothers. Watch the mothers. Listen to them. Listen to them when they're lying to you. Watch the lies on their face. Watch the pain race across their faces. Precedent prior to every one of those lies. Abortion is hugely self-destructive for anyone who is actively, overtly involved in one, but it's unbelievably self-destructive for the mother. No woman ever recovers from having an abortion. She never gets over it. Again, go see the movie about ripping off the Band-Aid. You can do better. You can feel better. But you will never get rid of this regret, and that's the reason not to do it. And that's true for anything that will result in lifelong enduring regret. But the defect here is in the failure to identify the self. Rand failed to identify the nature of self-destruction, and so she becomes a huge advocate for one of the most enduringly self-destructive things a person can do. Obviously, murdering an older child would probably be worse. Murdering an adult might be worse than that. Murdering your alleged best beloved would probably be worse than that. But there is no circumstance in which murdering a genetic Homo sapiens, particularly your own child, could ever be anything other than enduringly, permanently self-destructive. The objectivists have never offered any sort of argument against that because, of course, they can't. It's obvious. It's obviously true as soon as you read the post. And again, when I first did this, I did it in one paragraph. I mean, it literally took me 2 minutes at most to write the paragraph that dispensed with the objectivist argument for abortion. But I subsequently wrote a couple of posts about it. They're on self-adoration. Again, go to self-adoration.com and search for abortion. You'll find them just like that. I don't write about abortion. I really don't care about abortion all that much, except as a symptom for everything else that's wrong in the world, and we'll come back to that. But the fact that the official objectivists have not addressed the unbelievable hole I found at the basis of their moral philosophy, and they haven't addressed this absurdly stupid, vicious abortion argument that they continue to propound to this very day. And now, after Father's Day, I've completely disassembled Rand's arguments for marriage and family. Rand's positions are pretty nebulous, and it will be easy when the official objectivists finally wake up and realize that I have stole their lunch. It will be easy for them to quibble about what Rand really meant. But what Rand said was, oh yes, marriage is very important, sort of. And you should always keep an eye out for the person that you're going to be married to. But in the meantime, why not screw around? And she didn't really say it that way. She said it's okay to have affairs. Affairs is an interesting word, too, because she probably meant, you know, given that she was born in 1904, she probably meant premarital sex. It's okay to have premarital sex. But the word affairs also implies adultery. And of course, Rand was a lifelong secret adulteress, or half-lifelong secret adulteress with Nathaniel Brandon. Lanny Peikoff had to earn his money as a fawning nephew when Barbara Brandon's book, The Passion of Ayn Rand, came out, because that's when it exposed this adultery and whispered about forever. But Barbara Brandon would be reveal all the details. I was at Fort Hall Forum in Boston that year watching Peikoff sweat bullets as he was lying to all these people whose donations he depended upon for his livelihood. Lenny lives a real nice life in Laguna Niguel, California, or someplace like that. If he had to live on the proceeds of his own effort, he'd live a lot less well. He lives on the proceeds of Ayn Rand's effort and the proceeds of all the very rich people who like the work that Ayn Rand did. But Father's Day takes apart Rand's argument of marriage and family, again, in very obvious ways, because Rand's philosophy of marriage and family is self-destructive. And this is really obvious. Again, quibbling about specific language in the Ayn Rand lexicon is not useful. What's useful is looking at Rand's own life, the life of her closest followers, and the lives of the Big-O Objectivists in general. And what we end up with is a philosophy of childlessness. Official objectivism is a philosophy of childlessness. Ayn Rand herself had no children. K. Nolt Smith, in Elegy for a Soprano, intimates that while she was still in Russia, Ayn Rand might have had an abortion, or she might have actually killed the child. Had a child and killed it. And this is pure gossip, pure speculation. There's no evidence for this whatever, except that this person who was very close to Ayn Rand for a very long time wrote a book that was clearly about Ayn Rand, that intimated that Ayn Rand's hostility to children was not purely intellectual, that her hostility to children was a reflection of her own past acts. And I don't know if that's true or not, but the woman had no children. She was married her whole life to Frank O'Connor, one husband, 3 cheers for her, but she arguably entertained adulterous thoughts throughout that marriage. There are all kinds of casual reports about frisky little Ayn looking a little too flirty at home. And then, of course, she entered into a decade-long adulterous relationship with Nathaniel Brandon, allegedly with the convivence of their spouses. But let me tell you about that one. I hate that crap, and this is one of the things that I find really disturbingly off-putting by Ayn Rand is her ivory tower intellectualism. As much as she denigrated that kind of thinking, she was certainly guilty of it. And her attitudes on sex, marriage, and family are of a piece with the post-Marxist philosophy that she grew up in the teens and 20s in Russia, and then later in the 20s and 30s in the United States. This attitude of you're only young once, have some fun, live a little, all that stuff. This is all of a piece with Marxism, and it's propounded. The reason for promulgating that doctrine is to destroy the family. And Ayn Rand ended up being very much an advocate of destroying the family by not creating them, not creating families. And Big-O Objectivists don't create families. They may marry, they may stay married for life, but very few of them have children. Those who do typically have one child. If you're going to have children, having less than 3 doesn't really make any sense to me. Certainly in terms of population replacement, it makes no sense whatever. And that, I think, is ultimately the most fatally consequential error in Ayn Rand's philosophy, is that by being anti-children and anti-family, she's basically self-exterminated her doctrine. She has a philosophy that is enormously appealing to people like me. Enormously appealing to people like me. I'm an INTJ in the Briggs-Myers system. I am a geek, a nerd. INTJs are something like 3%, about maybe 7%. I don't remember. I get a lot of gas for not remembering specific numbers like I really care. INTJs are outliers. That's what's important about them, is that they're outliers. They're all outliers. They are the people who run our world. They run our businesses in particular. INTJs are the boss. The CEO is always going to be an INTJ, an INTP, an ESTJ, an ESTP, something like that. This is where you're going to find the boss, always. The bosses who don't have these personality characteristics don't last as bosses. The other thing that you'll find in bosses is the one that I have the most, which is D in the DIS system. D stands for driver, done, do it. What it really stands for is dominant. To be a D is to be dominant, socially dominant. And to be a D is to be very aggressively interested in getting things done. INTJ, high D, that's the big boss, typically in a corporation. I am the big boss of my business, but my business has 2 employees, one of whom is me. So I don't really count as a big boss, but I have that as my natural personality disposition, is to take over any organization I happen to find myself in, and I do. I get away with it. Nobody stops me. Partly they don't stop me because I'm irrepressible, and partly they don't stop me because they don't want the responsibility, and I do. But I think that being anti-child is particularly stupid for Ayn Rand, because her philosophy really only appeals aboriginally, the aboriginal adherents to Ayn Rand's philosophy, the first person in the family, the head of a long line of Big-O Objectivists. That person is going to be an INTJ or an INTP. Going to be. So you take a high school graduating class of, let's say, 1,000 kids to make it easy. Out of that 1,000 kids, maybe 100 are in that INTJ, INTP category. Maybe more, because it's a graduating class and half the kids who started high school don't finish. So even if it's 200, make it 200. Out of that 200, half of them are going to be communists already, because that's what happens to smart kids in high school. They turn into communists. Their teachers turn them into communists. The other half are available to Rand, and they may find her books and they may read them. At the end of the day, it may be, out of that graduating class of 1,000 kids, there may be 10 who end up serious, dedicated, morally acute, morally serious people who are at least fundamentally or in principle aware of Ayn Rand's philosophical doctrines. In other words, one Big-O objectivist and maybe 10 small O objectivists, and, you know, maybe 39 more small L libertarians out of those 1,000 kids, but that's Ayn Rand's entire crop in that high school, is really, practically speaking, 10 kids. And that's how her philosophy can grow, is by attracting 1% of every high school graduating class, which is about what she does. And that's great. I mean, that is really great in terms of having an on-the-ground philosophical movement that can attract 1% of young people every year. That's great, except if those young people don't reproduce, then the conversion was useless, because your philosophy will die with each one of those adherents. And you're constantly going to have to recruit new adherents, and eventually you'll be supplanted by somebody else, that those 10 kids won't read The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, they'll read something else. And Ayn Rand will disappear. She will be in the history books, and down there at the bottom of the page will be Leonard Peikoff as a great big footnote. But there won't be a philosophical movement, because philosophical movements grow by breeding. And objectivists don't breed. Feminists don't breed. Men's rights activists don't breed. God bless them, environmentalists don't breed. I'm so glad for that one. Amazingly enough, our friends the Marxists don't breed. So, interestingly enough, every one of these doctrines is going to die off in the next 2 or 3 generations, because philosophical movements that don't breed don't survive. And I consider this an amazingly consequential error in Rand's philosophy. And that Peikoff's policy is that it is absolutely impossible to correct Ayn Rand except with respect to homosexuals and women presidents. Somehow or another, those 2 errors don't count as errors. They do count as errors, whereas nothing else does. But a philosophical movement that is built to self-destruct, that is built to isolate a particular kind of malcontent, a malcontent like me, to identify and isolate that particular type of malcontent and push him out of the child-rearing market, of the fatherhood or motherhood game. If this is not a mistake, then the CIA paid for it. And if it is a mistake, the Big-O objectivists need to correct it right now, and the way to correct it, frankly, is to take the book Father's Day and say Ayn Rand's theories on love, sex, marriage, and family are now replaced by this book. That's the right thing to do. The other groups that I really expect to get a lot of support from eventually, but I haven't seen much so far, are social conservatives and Christians. And the reason for that is that I'm giving them secular proofs for moral principles that are very, very, very important to them. Chastity, fidelity, monogamy, storgic love, which no one talks about. No one in the damn universe talks about storgic love except for me. And the Christians should be talking about it all the time. They talk all the time about agape, which is stupid. Agape is just reprocessed Marxism, ultimately. Agape, the way that Paul and the later Christians have interpreted the word agape, is essentially self-sacrifice, and a religion of self-sacrifice is absurd, is vicious, evil, wrong. That if you practiced self-sacrifice in the way that the Christians and the Marxists aggrandize it, your own children would die, and anything that you do that harms your children is a grievous moral fault, regardless of whatever excuse you offer for it, whatever pretext you put up for making war on your own children. There is no excuse for that. If it's evil to commit infanticide, it's evil to commit prenatal infanticide, it's evil to commit slow motion infanticide of your children by expending your resources on somebody else's children instead. That's evil. That's wrong. But the Christians and the social conservatives should be all over Father's Day, because I'm solving a whole lot of problems that confront them first and worst. These are the people who actually have intact families for the most part. That if you're looking for a large percentage of intact families, look among Christians, among social conservatives, among military families, among families who are still strongly tied to social institutions that were around in the 18th and 19th centuries, as opposed to everyone else who is loosely tied to social institutions that were created in the 20th, 21st centuries. In other words, government institutions, Marxist institutions. The only families that are truly healthy in the United States are the families that are un-Marxist. The more un-Marxist your family is, the happier your family is going to be. And those people in those families, social conservatives, Christians, military families, other families like that who are doing okay for now, really should pick up Father's Day and figure out how to keep doing okay from now on, and how to train their children, how to raise their children so that they will be able to successfully execute the responsibilities of marriage and family. My experience this week was a lot of fun, because I got viciously flamed by feminists on Thursday, and got viciously flamed by men's rights activists on Saturday. And in the process, I realized that both of these phenomenon, feminism and men's rights activism, both of them are manifestations of fatherlessness. That anything that we might want to talk about that's lamentable, unwanted, unwelcome, unhealthy in civil society, any of those things, I predict, can be traced back to fatherlessness. Abortion, definitely. That obviously the baby who's being killed is fundamentally fatherless. There may be a dad who really wants to be involved and is really being robbed of his paternity, but for most of those guys, it's not that way at all. These are irresponsible jackasses who let their seed get loose on them and are very happy to see the consequences of their mistake destroyed. They will suffer regret for this too, but nowhere near as seriously as mom will, and that's why it's a matter of greater importance for mom. Mom is probably fatherless. Dad is probably fatherless also. That the children most likely to have so-called unwanted pregnancies are the people who don't think about the consequences of their action, and that set of people is strongly in overlap with fatherless children. We lament racism to the extent that anyone is actively a racist rather than just being casually stupid in their opinions, but actively a racist. I would look for absent, divorced, or distant father. And that, I would cite that for any other, vicious political movement that you want to name, any political movement that's aimed at any sort of hatred or rancor, like feminism, like men's rights activism. I would look for fatherlessness. It's undoubtedly there somewhere. Politicized science is one that I deal with it all the time because I think it's really interesting. Mark Stein is going to save the Western world on the basis of his lawsuit with Michael Mann and the global warmongers. But that sort of thing, casual corruption, when you find casual corruption, I would look for an absent, divorced, or distant father. That the idea of honor, being honorable in everything you do, being a man of honor, never cheating your neighbors, never being in a situation where you're looking to stick your pain onto somebody else, like the yes, all women. People who don't do that have good fathers. And people who do those things, I would think, probably have bad fathers or no fathers at all. I throw off useless graduate degrees all the time. Anytime that I say something that rankles you and you think, that can't possibly be true. Does he have any facts to support that? Where's the evidence? Let me see the statistics. Go make your own statistics. Do your own damn research. But do it. And if it turns out I'm wrong, have fun with it. But if it turns out I'm right, come back and tell me. I'm a practical ontologist. I'm not, high C's are the ones who do all of that tabulation. High D's do not do things like that. When you tell a high D to tabulate index cards, he goes to lunch, or he quits the job, or he fires you. But he's not going to do scut work. I don't do scut work. And if you don't like it that I don't do scut work, dang. But if you want to do the scut work based on the things I say, go do them. I dare you to do them. And I predict that I won't be wrong about any of this shit because I pay attention to similarities. I am a practical ontologist. I pay attention to the world around me. And I see the same shit over and over again, and the same shit has the same motivations over and over again. But it's easy to guess fatherlessness, especially now, because virtually every child growing up is fatherless in one way or another. Either dad was never there, and thank God mom didn't kill you. Every chance you get, just give your mom a call and say, thank you so much for not putting me among the 53 million children who have been killed by their own mothers. Thank you for not killing me, Mom. But if you grew up in a true single mother household, in other words, a household where there never was a father, or if you grew up in a single mother household because mom hired the constable to kick dad out, take all his money, and ruin his life, didn't do anything for your relationship with him, I promise. Or if your dad was just distant, remote, working all the time, uninterested, just there. I may have accounted for 80% of all 25-year-olds by now, one way or another. I mean, I really don't know. And this is another master's degree maybe, because this doesn't quite seem like a PhD-worthy waste of time. Maybe this is just a master's degree-worthy waste of time. But some huge percentage, 60, 70, 80, maybe even 85, 90% of 25-year-olds are going to be fatherless in the way that I just described it. So it's no real challenge for me to recognize that feminists, men's rights activists, Marxists in general, hideous, evil, awful trolls, haters, malcontents, people who can't do anything, can't make an argument of any sort, but can only either weep or bellow, can't control their emotions. These people are all fatherless. That all of the characteristics that make for reasonable, rational, civil discourse that results in improved understanding on both sides, all of those things you learn from your father. And if you don't have a father growing up, you never learn them. You never learn them. This is what an adult baby is. Fundamentally, an adult baby is a fatherless child. Fatherless, grown-up fatherless child. This is tragic. This is really tragic. It's tragic to kill him, and it's tragic not to raise him. Bad news for you. You're stuck with it either way. You're glad to be alive, and thank your mom, thank your dad. Thanks for not killing me. Thanks for not killing me. Thanks for putting a roof over my head. Thanks for putting food in my body. Thanks for seeing to it that I got some kind of an education, no matter how poor it was. Thanks for all that. But for you to become a fully mature, self-responsible, morally serious adult, you're going to have to raise yourself. There is no alternative. You will, I promise you, you will in due course. It's going to take you longer, but you will. Simple reason that you can't escape the consequences of your own choices. Many people can escape the consequences of your bad decisions, but you can't. You never can. And eventually you will get tired of living with those ugly consequences. You'll get tired enough that you'll change your behavior. Welcome to my world. Welcome to my job. Welcome to the Church of Splendor. So that really is my peroration for the day, is that I want you, as always, I mean, I'm only interested in talking about shit, garbage, the dump, the toilet. I'm only interested in talking about the turd in the punch bowl long enough to show you why it doesn't really matter. And what I think matters to you most in light of these hideous, horrible things going on all around you is to cultivate joyousness. I love that word, joyousness, not joyfulness. Joyfulness is a good state of being. To be joyful is to be full of joy, and that's a great thing, but it's temporary. You're only full of joy while the circumstance that makes you joyful is continuing, maybe for a little while thereafter, but then, like all emotions, it fades. But to be joyous is a permanent mental condition if you cultivate it, if you work at it. To be joyous is to be of joy. It's genitive. Genitive. If all the people who don't know what the word genitive means were to write me a letter, I have around 6 billion emails at least. Genitive describes an oveness. Genitive describes really describes a family relationship. Genitive comes from the idea of gens in Latin. Gens is your clan, is your family. To be of the Cornelis, the Cornelii, the Cornelius clan, that's a genitive relationship. And to be joyous is to be of joy. And if you are of joy in your attitude all the time, if you are always looking for the win, if you are never willing to settle for the loss, if you are always looking for your own values and your own happiness, if you're always looking to be joyful, then you almost always will be joyful. And that's the benefit of joyousness, is to cultivate that attitude, that the purpose of everything you're doing, on top of whatever else your objective is, a purpose of what you're doing is to be joyful in it. I loved it. The Crystal Cathedral way back when, I can't remember the preacher's name, but I used to watch him. I've watched a lot of televangelists on TV over the decades. But Robert Schuller was his name, and he would come out every Sunday and he would say, it's from Proverbs, I'm quoting from Proverbs. He says, "This is the day the Lord God has made. Rejoice and be glad in it." Make fun of televangelists, make fun of TV preachers, make fun of their stupid rhetorical tricks, but I really like that message. Rejoice and be glad in it. You will live one time. You will not repeat any day of your life. Every day that you've lived so far is gone, and every choice you made in those days is with you forever. It will never be gone. If you pursue joyousness, if you live of joy, if your attitude is of joy, you will have many, many, many fewer regrets and infinitely more happy, happy memories. And ultimately, your mental awareness of your life, your memories of it, your awareness of it now, your anticipation of it in the future, that's what your life is as a human being. And you are a genetic Homo sapien, you are a living organism, you're a mammal, and your life consists of those sorts of lives also, but the life that matters most to you is the life that matters most to you is the life of yourself. Yourself is an idea. And your ideas are definitely subject to your ongoing ratiocination, so think better, think joyously, and live a wonderful life. If the social conservatives, the Christians, and the Big-O Objectivists want to amend the defects in their own praxis by taking account of Father's Day, I will be very grateful for this. This is a book that should be talked about. I don't even care if it's denounced. It's a book that should be talked about. But I need for you to be talking about it also, so please do that. And in the meantime, I need you to be pursuing your values relentlessly and one of those values should be joy. And if you are of joy, if you are joyous in everything that you do, you will be joyful in everything that you do. This is something that no one can give to you, but it's also something no one can take away. It's yours and yours alone. That's egoism. I invented it. My name is Greg Swann. This is the Church of Splendor. I am so grateful to everyone who endures me like this week after week. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. Bless you. Thank you so much. Have a great day.